What is up, guys? This is KJ, aka Rakurai Network, bringing you guys a brand new video today. It took Goku years to learn Super Saiyan and eventually master it, and it took Master Roshi a very long time to learn the Kamehameha and the Mafuba and things such as that. There's a certain level of training, a certain level of how long it takes these characters to learn specific techniques, and Dragon Ball Super in particular has created some moments where people have sort of questioned how did someone learn this so quickly when it took another character so long to learn. And many people put it under that basic term of it being bad writing. And the thing is, I will be very blunt up front and say that I don't believe this is bad writing, and I believe it's completely sensible considering the universe that we're in, the genre that we're in. On top of that, there's real life psychology that goes into why this sort of thing works. So in order to find out more about why that is, let's roll the intro and get right into the video. So, when it comes to this whole idea of characters learning abilities way too quickly, a lot of people do believe that it is just bad writing. They're not explaining things properly. This character is just way too advanced. They shouldn't be learning these things so quick. I don't believe this is bad writing at all. One example that people use a lot as a reason for why this shouldn't make sense is that it hits the breaking point of what the term suspension of disbelief allows for. And essentially, suspension of disbelief is defined as a willingness to suspend one's critical faculties and believe the unbelievable, sacrifice of realism and logic for the sake of enjoyment. Now, I have a few issues with when people state this for a reason for why Super is poor in its narrative. The thing about this is that suspension of disbelief is basically saying just take your brain out of something and just watch it, just have fun. And I don't feel that's something that you should ever do when you're watching any show whatsoever, right? The thing about Dragon Ball in general is that you should be able to think things through, and you should be able to think to yourself, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? And that, that whole opinion of whether or not it does make sense is 100% up to you. You're not wrong for thinking that it doesn't make sense, and someone who does think it makes sense isn't wrong either. Now, there may be those situations where you say to yourself that enough is enough and that Super has done something so inexplicably awful that you have to rant about it. However, using the lack of suspension of disbelief as a reason for why it makes no sense, frankly, makes no sense. How can one say that something makes no sense because it should not make you have to not think? And I almost bit my tongue saying that. And it's just a belief that I don't really necessarily support. And the thing about suspension of disbelief is that you completely suspend your critical faculties. You completely stop being an analyst. So another issue that I have with when people say that is that you're implying the suspension of disbelief, that whole belief system, that ideology, that it has a limitation. But the entire definition itself doesn't, it isn't a partial definition. It isn't something that's situational. It's saying to completely suspend one's critical faculties and just turn your brain off and watch. It never says in a situation, that's pleasing to the viewer and stuff like that. It's just very straightforward. So suspension of disbelief isn't one of those things that are situational. They are just 100% of the time. That's just what you have to do. And to say again that it borderlines on the impossible, that's normal. That's normal, and especially if you're using suspension of disbelief, then you should be okay with that. But again, I don't think the idea of suspension of disbelief is even a good thing to begin with. I'm just saying for why I don't think that necessarily is not the best reason, I suppose, just in my opinion, of course. But another thing that's interesting is just that I find that a lot of people think that because I like Super, I must watch it with my brain off. But no, I watch Super and I enjoy it, and I am able to analyze it myself, which I have full right to do, while still finding little to no issues with the series. I'm able to watch Super and make sense of it, and there's really nothing wrong with that. Just like if someone watches Super and thinks there's a lot wrong with it, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Bearing that in mind, the suspension of disbelief is something that I already feel is a bad thing, and moreover, one should always be able to critically think about situations that happen and make sense of it when it comes to Dragon Ball. These situations, when it comes to Dragon Ball Super, are no different. I basically wanted to start with the suspension of disbelief argument just to set up a further point. I have a small little anecdote, maybe just a small little story, if I may. There's nothing that I absolutely hate more than, let's say it's for a math test, right? Since I'm just really bad at math. I study like every day for 3 hours for a math test. Let's say the test is on Friday and I'm starting to study on Monday, right? I'm studying like 3 hours every single day for this test. And I'm just grinding. I'm just grinding, getting all the practice questions right, doing all the practice exams. I'm doing all of this hard work, right? I'm doing everything in my power to make sure I pass this test. And not even pass, I want to get an A for that matter. So by the time that Friday comes along, I've studied for at least 12 hours, right? Due to it being 3 every day and then the test Friday, all that. And then I get my test back and I fail. Okay, there's nothing more frustrating than that. But what pours salt on that wound is seeing, little freaking Bob the Builder over here on the side that studied for maybe like 20 minutes before the test even began, and he just aces the test with no problem while I get an F. There is nothing more insulting than that. But do these situations happen? They do. I'm a person who can write essays. This has happened so many times before, even recently, where I've written essays that I really didn't prepare for at all. I honestly didn't. And I got a 100, maybe even extra credit on them, whereas somebody may have spent, again, 12 plus hours writing their essay and they fail. It's not fair, but it's just something that happens in life. It just happens. And the main thing is that everybody has their strong suits. My strong suit is just English, and freaking Bob the Builder looking face over here, his strong suit is math. That's just legitimately real life logic. It's no different than a YouTuber, say, getting 2 views per video, even though they've uploaded over 600 videos, versus a YouTuber that uploads 1 video and gets over 15 million views. A lot of us have seen this sort of thing happen in school. Heck, maybe you're like me with English, and you're that kid that doesn't have to prepare as much as someone else in a particular class in general. There are some levels of this that can be explained, and some levels that just can't be explained. And I'll try my best to explain both ends. So, this comes to the question of why do some people learn more quickly than others? And I quickly want to go to an article that I read. This is a quote by Professor Scott Grafton from University of California, Santa Barbara. And this is in an article, well, I suppose a magazine or online publication named Indian Express. And they relay that it's useful to think of your brain as housing a very large toolkit. When you start to learn a challenging new skill, such as playing a new musical instrument, your brain uses many different tools in desperate attempts to produce anything remotely close to music. With time and practice, fewer tools are needed and core motor areas are able to support most of the behavior. Basically, most keep trying and trying despite tribulations, and thus the idea of trial and error comes into play. Trial and error basically referring to, I tried this once, this didn't fail, let me try something else. And this is just a type of idea that games such as Crash Bandicoot thrive off of. Researchers eventually found, however, that these same tools that the brain uses, for the trial and error ideology, can eventually become a hindrance after a certain level of training and practice. Thus, if one can cut off communication to these specific neural tools, then it's much easier to excel. Basically, consider it like overthinking. Sort of, you're trying so hard to do something that's the very reason for why you're messing up. Moving forward in the written explanation, Indian Express states that, and this is a bit of like, inserted words to fit into the context of what I'm saying, but the critical distinction between these groups is the frontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, thought to be most critical for executive function. Executive function, by the way, is defined as a set of processes that all have to do with managing oneself and one's resources in order to achieve a goal. It's an umbrella statement for neurologically based skills involving mental control and self-regulation. So, the thing about executive function is that, again, these things can, in fact, become inhibitors after a while. And concerning these cortices and executive function, high proficiency of executive function is great for conquering difficult tasks, but as Indian Express continues, it might actually be a hindrance for mastering simple ones. Very, very interesting. This makes me think immediately of Goku and Vegeta as of Dragon Ball Super and the little roadblock that they've gone through of Whis trying to teach them move without thinking. This is your task. And Goku and Vegeta just haven't seemed to be able to learn it yet. Now, mind you, Goku has gotten incredibly strong. Vegeta has gotten incredibly strong. But no matter what they do, they never master this idea of, well, moving without thinking. A lot of people look at this and say that this is stupid, this is bad writing, why haven't they learned this already? But this is literally saying cut off communication to neural parts in your system. This is saying cut off certain cords that connect to your brain. That's not easy. It's more than just a fighting science. That this is becoming more of a thing of literally blocking out neurological functions. That's not something that you can just do very easily. Going off of that, however, why is it that the kids in Dragon Ball seem to learn Super Saiyan even faster than the adults? Why is it that Gohan, Goten, and Trunks seem to learn this so quickly? Future Trunks even, for example. One last kicker, Indian Express begins to conclude their entire article by stating that Grafton also said that the frontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex are among the last brain regions to fully develop in humans, which may help explain why children are able to acquire new skills quickly as compared to adults. People who can turn off the communication to these parts of their brain are the quickest in their completion times. And this was said by lead author Danielle Bassett, I believe, from University of Pennsylvania. So the reason why the kids learn Super Saiyan and other abilities so quickly is literally just a matter of science. The cortices basically make it to where one thinks way too much in order to figure out certain tasks, whereas a child doesn't really think before they act. They don't really think about stakes or anything like that. They just accomplish it. They have no other brain function than to just do it. It was a lot more difficult than Kid Gohan at the time because, again, this was during the time of the androids and Cell. There was a lot going on in his mind. He knew that his father knew Super Saiyan, and that kind of made a mental roadblock for him, I believe, that sort of, made him already a bit mentally preoccupied. But Goten and Trunks, as kids, they had nothing really going on. There was nothing canonically going on during this time, so they didn't really have any mental roadblocks to overcome during that point. They're an off-screen mystery due to, just ambiguity in Dragon Ball in general, but one thing is for certain, they did not have a hard time going Super Saiyan at all. But if you have a subconscious guilt of something that you can't get to someone else's academic level, physical level, mental level, whatever the case may be, that guilt may be the very thing that's keeping you from being higher on the totem pole. It's the same simple logic with Trunks learning the Mafuba in Dragon Ball Super and the Trunks arc to an extent. Putting it simply, some people learn quickly while others take years to learn. It took me a year and a half to learn what style my videos were, and I'm still trying to figure it out, whereas it takes some people a couple of minutes to figure out the whole thing. Again, with the basic testing example, you may take a test with 2 minutes of preparation and get a higher score than I, who spent 4 hours preparing. Is it fair? Absolutely not, but is it unrealistic? Not at all. The same logic is there for Universe 6 and their Saiyans, but the idea here is that some students learn in different ways. Goku and Vegeta had to learn Super Saiyan through anger and rage, whereas Caulifla did it because she discovered a back tingle sensation that allowed her to. Do I find that stupid? A little bit, but still, it's not bad writing. It's simply a matter of learning in different ways. Some students take notes with a pen and paper, some do it with a laptop. Would you say that the person who got a higher grade is poorly written? No, you would not. Some Saiyans learn to go Super Saiyan via just pure unbridled rage, whereas some do it by finding a freaking back tingle that they realize can activate the form in an easier way. Yet that's different for some reason than it is to real life because it's Dragon Ball Super, I guess. The reasoning of it took Goku and Vegeta years to do it is, as I've said before, just not really valid in my opinion. There's more of a personal bias against Universe 6 favoring the Universe 7 Saiyans than it is a legitimate criticism. People learn at different speeds and in different ways, and that's just something that applies to real life. With that being said, my final point is just this. All of these points that I just stated are concerning real life, actual real connections and correlations, but bear in mind that Dragon Ball is a work of fiction, commercial fiction at that, not non-fiction. With that being said, every single thing that I just stated relating to students learning in the real world things quicker or slower than someone else, that's just multiplied by 100 because we're in a fictional story as well. The bounds of human reasoning don't really equate to what fiction can truly accomplish in comparison. And there are moments where, yes, it doesn't make any sense to just, the untrained eye. But again, We're used to things like this happening in Dragon Ball and fiction in general. This is nothing new. So if reality can accomplish something, you can't even imagine what more fiction can do, and you can't criticize it for saying that fiction of all things is being unrealistic. But as always, that's just my opinion on it. I know I sounded a bit more adamant in this video than I usually do, but this is a video I've been meaning to get out for a while, and it's a topic that's actually kind of serious to me. Either way though, if you enjoyed the video and or agree with anything that I had to say, please do drop a like and comment below. Be sure to share the video with people that you know and people that you don't know but that you just want to harass in my videos, in which case thank you, and please subscribe to the channel if you are new. With that being said, guys, I love you all so much. I hope you all have an amazing day. Don't let anyone change who you are, and God bless. Peace out, everyone.